At this time, I'll call the meeting to order for the Budget Committee and ask Pat to call roll, please.
Lael. Here. Lewis. Here. Melton. Here. Mitchell.
Here.
Samples. You have a quorum.
I'll also ask Pat if you would please make the emergency announcement.
In the event of an emergency evacuation, an alarm will sound. Everyone should exit the building by way of the nearest stairwell in a safe and effective manner. If the nearest stairwell is blocked by smoke, use the other stairwell. Do not use the elevator. Once you've reached the main floor, follow the exit signs to exit the building and quickly proceed away from the building. Please be mindful of others evacuating and emergency vehicles.
Thank you, Pat. At this time, I'll ask if there's any input on items on the agenda. Okay, seeing none, we'll move to D1, purchasing. These items are for information only, so we'll move to the next item, which is the minutes. We need a motion to approve the minutes. They were in your packets. Does anyone have any questions? Do I have a motion? Have a second? Okay, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor, say aye. Any opposed? The motion passes. Increase and decreases. Next, we have the finance portion of the agenda, and we'll start with the increases. If approved, these items will then go on to the commission for approval. F1A, General County Emergency Management. Kathy, you want to explain the $56,000 on the grant?
This one is the same grant we get yearly. It's just different amounts depending on what the feds decide we're going to use. And it is emergency management performance grants. It's reimbursement on the expenses that the emergency management agency department has. And that's what the reason I'm able to cut our budget from general county spending is because of the reimbursement on this grant.
Okay. Do I have a motion? Second? Okay. Do you have any discussion? I'll ask for a roll call vote, please.
Lael. Yes. Lewis. Yes. Melton. Yes. Mitchell.
Yes.
Samples. Motion passed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
F1B, this is General County transfer, $923,258.36 for the Tourism Development Authority. Randy, will you explain that?
When Commission approved the agreement between creating the new Tourism Development Authority, and the Tourism Development Authority then secured a loan from First Tennessee Bank to pay us. First Tennessee Bank also held that note for us for the real estate next to the visitor center. This is to record the transaction of what took place, the actual sale of the asset to them and the retirement of the note off of our books. These two transactions together.
B and C?
Yes.
Got a motion? Do I have got a second? Now discussion.
So does that mean paid off? It's off our books now?
That note is paid off and off our books, and that $923,258.36 was the value of what remained on the note. We may have some tweaking that we have to do on this with the auditors now that they're in doing the field work and all that stuff, but this basically takes care of the transaction.
Any other discussion?
Your motion to move on B and C. Yes.
B and C. Okay, I'll ask Pat for roll call vote.
Lael.
Yes.
Lewis.
Yes.
Melton.
Yes.
Mitchell.
Yes.
Samples. Motion's passed.
Now we'll be discussing the transfer items on the agenda. F2A, General Purpose School Fund Technology, Capital Outlay, $15,636, transfer to the correct amount. Troy, you want?
Based on the accounting rules, if the cost of a capital item is greater than $5,000, it has to be recorded in cost center 76-100. So this is just moving the funds from one capital line item to, basically to another capital line item.
Do I hear a motion? Have a second. Now open for discussion. Any discussion? I'll ask for a roll call vote.
Lael. Yes. Lewis. Yes. Melton. Yes. Mitchell.
Yes.
Samples. Motion passed.
This is general purpose school fund, education support, $40,000. Troy, you explain that one?
Yes, sir. This is actually a budget increase, $40,000 for other charges via use of fund balance, if we may. This is some state mandated costs of, and let me try to get this right, Blount County school students that are admitted to residential mental health facilities in Tennessee by state policy memorandum and pursuant to Chapter 426 of Public Acts of 2011, we are required to allocate funding in an amount equal to the per pupil state and local funds received by us to those state licensed facilities if we have any students that are admitted to those mental health facilities. The actual amount per student is $37 per day that we were told by the state is the amount that we have to fund. This came up last year. It was very confusing. We actually never had to pay any invoices from last year because we disputed a lot of it. They were providing all the required information from those facilities for invoicing purposes. So we kept going back and forth. We have since settled on 2 students from last year that we paid out of existing funds in our budget this year. But this is an estimate of possibly up to 6 students that we may have this year. We know of 2 that have been recently admitted at the beginning of this year. We've not received any billing on that so far. So this is an anticipation of getting those invoices from those facilities this year.
No. Do I have a motion? Second? Okay, open for discussion.
So you only have 2 students, but you're estimating at least 6 based upon?
Well, we had 2 from last year that we have settled on and paid. There are actually 3 or 4 others that we still don't have invoices or final invoices that we know what we're going to have to pay.
Okay.
And so I'm not sure if any of those 5 are still in. We've got only 2 in those facilities right now for this year.
Troy, most of this cost, is this incumbent upon local funds to pay these costs on these special education students that are admitted to a facility? There's some of the stuff I know in special ed, and my memory's a little fuzzy on part of it, but
These are
some
not
of it
this is not coming out of special
local
ed
funds.
This is not coming out of special ed funds.
That's what I'm saying. There's no fund for it other than what local funds can be brought up for that. Is that correct?
Well, the state is telling us that we receive state funds based on these students being in our enrollment.
Gotcha.
And so their calculation of $37 a day is in part the state funds that go along with those kids.
Yeah, because they're given X amount of value on the weighted formula and the whole process, and so this is asking for that to be pulled out, to be put into that. How does that become a budget increase if you've already got them in your budget?
I'm sorry.
How does this become a budget increase if you've already got them in your budget?
Well, I did not budget the appropriations to pay this to those facilities this year.
Okay. So this would be on the expenditure side of the budget. That would be that part of the, okay.
Troy, did we anticipate that we wouldn't have to pay this year? I mean, why did we take it out of there, I guess,
Well, it was never in the budget. I did not include it in the 12-13 budget. Wasn't sure what amount to use. Wasn't sure how many we might have. I probably should have included some amount in the original budget, but I did not.
How much was in there last year? Or did we budget for it last year?
No, sir. We did not budget any last year, nor did we pay any last year. We've paid 2 this year since July 1 from last year's. We've settled on 2 from last year, but we paid it out of current funds that we've got. I paid it out of 2 accounts that we had this year where there was some monies that I felt like we could pay that out of.
And or is there no accounts to transfer from to cover this except for fund balance?
Well, at this point in the year, I don't know what surpluses we may have in some accounts. It's real early for me to be able to do that, so at the end of the day, it's going to come out of fund balance or one of those accounts. It's coming out of fund balance at the end of the day anyway, so that was the easiest thing for me to do in this case, was to use fund balance.
Well, it only come out of fund balance if we ended up with a shortage in whatever account that you took it out of.
It'll only come out of fund balance if we actually incur the expenditure this year and have to pay any of this $40,000. This is just a budget, just an estimate.
Do you intend next year to put that in the special ed fund so that?
It won't come out of special ed funds. It's not allowed to come out of special ed funds. But I intend to put it in the budget next year.
Because obviously my only irritation with it is that it's another use of fund balance that we probably should have put in the budget. I just hate to see, we keep running back to the fund balance and keep depleting that fund balance when actually that's a recurring line item somewhere that we need to try to account for every year.
That's a fair point.
Troy, you say these students are at $37 a day. Is this assuming that they're going to be there for, if we're charging by the day, does it necessarily mean they're going to be there for a year or 2 years or 2 days or 10 days?
This would be the maximum because I've based it on 177 days, which is a full year. And obviously they're not going to be there a full year. We don't know when they're going to get admitted to those facilities. They may be mid-year. It may be the last 20 days of school. We don't know. So this would be worst case scenario if we had 6 students enrolled all 177 days of school this year.
Do you have to prepay these people?
No, sir.
Well, then why do we not wait until we see how many are there before we draw down on fund balance?
Well, it's just, do you want me to come back here every single time we have a student?
No, I'm asking do they expect you to pay for each individual student as they go in, or is it one bill at the end of the year?
No, they're allowed to, I think, bill us monthly or they don't wait till the end of the year to bill us. The problem is on their end, these facilities have not, I don't know why they've not billed us on a regular basis, but when they've tried to bill us, it's not been correct. They haven't given us all the information. They've not verified their attendance, which they're supposed to do. So we're requiring them to give us a lot of backup and documentation to support that student being in those facilities on those days. And we're not going to pay those until we verify that. And so they're having trouble.
Right now, we only have 2 students, right? Is that what you said, or
We had
or is it 2
5.
holdovers?
We had 5 in some facility for some amount of time last year. We have settled and paid on 2 of those. The other 3 we're still trying to nail down and figure out what we owe on those 3.
Randy, is this something that needs to just be a special account set up for it? In the chart of accounts, is there such an
I don't know if
animal?
the state has, I haven't looked at this one specifically to see if the state's got some account set up, but I would imagine.
The state did not give us any direction as to what account to use to appropriate and expend the funds.
There's probably not enough of them to standardize, it would be my I guess. I don't know that, but.
You don't think that every school district probably has the same problem?
They're all under
Yeah,
the
I just
same.
don't know that from a volume standpoint, it warrants its own account code structure. I don't know that.
Well, I'm like Commissioner Lewis, I'm just a little bit leery of drawing down on the fund balance. It's dangerously low anyway.
Well, I think I'd rather wait. Maybe the point is, depending on how we get billed, I don't know why we should transfer a whole 40,000 if we may only need a portion of that.
But Commissioner Lewis, we're not going to spend all 40,000. This is a budget. This is estimating a top amount that we may have to spend. So I'm trying to appropriate on a conservative end the most amount that we might have to pay.
But it still comes out of the fund balance, transferred.
It's a budget appropriation and a use of fund balance on the revenue side.
Troy, does the state mandates this? Do they give us any reimbursement whatsoever on this?
Only in the BEP formula of whatever state funds they're giving us for those students they're on our roll, and so we get some amount of state funding. I
Just
can't
as
tell
if they
you.
were a regular student,
Yes,
not
yes.
not as a $37 a day.
No, probably not.
What's your recommendation, Randy?
If I understand the situation now, we're being told that we know we've got something in some amount of money not to exceed $40,000 that we're likely going to experience during the year based on what has just happened with this settlement on 2 people. This is their best efforts, I guess, to anticipate what their exposure might be on a not to exceed basis.
It's still a line item transfer out of fund balance.
Yeah, and it's because last year they didn't have one, but now that they've settled and realized you did have some exposure to last year, and they know they've got some more in the pipeline, and they know they're likely going to face some settlement on that this year.
Since this is coming as a result of the state reimbursal through the BEP program, is it possible to draw from the BEP revenue source rather than the fund balance?
I have the BEP budget is set exactly what the state has told us they're going to give us in BEP revenues. So if I increase the BEP revenue, I'd just be artificially inflating that number.
Okay.
I mean, I could go back and look at another revenue line item that might be coming in over what we budgeted and increase that number. You wouldn't want me to use sales tax or property tax because then you say, well, you're bumping up our maintenance of effort. So I didn't want to go that route.
I understand. We understand that part. What we're looking at is, and I think the main concern that I've heard expressed here is that, we need to leave the fund balance alone, no matter what the amounts are, and, be really careful with that. My iPad just kicked off. So.
Well, what I'm hearing is, do you want him to go back and find another line item to pull this from, or do we want to leave it?
I'd rather not see it come out of fund balance.
I guess we need to vote.
Yeah, you got a motion on
Yeah, go ahead and do a roll call.
The motion on the
Lael?
floor was for approval.
The motion
correct?
on the floor is to take this out of fund balance.
Okay.
Lael,
No.
Lewis,
No.
Melton. Yes. Mitchell,
No.
Samples.
Is it appropriate to make a motion that he go back and look at another revenue source for this item at this point?
Probably doesn't need a motion to do that.
You've got to pay the bill, it's going to do this.
Yeah, I mean, when I get a bill,
Well, I
if I
just
get
wanna know
one
if
this
you wanna-
month, then I'll just tell them I can't pay it until I come back to it.
Okay.
Makes sense to me. Pardon me?
Well, question, will the bill be for this year's students or last year's students?
And when we pay it, no matter which fund revenue source it comes out of, at the end of the day, it's coming out of fund balance.
If you've got an overestimated revenue,
When you close the books and we expend this money, if we expend any of this money, actual revenues and actual expenditures, whatever they net, comes out of fund balance at the end of the day, at the end of the
Net.
fiscal year. Is that not correct?
What I'm hearing is if you were to get an invoice, hypothetically, next week, obviously this body doesn't meet until next month, you would pay that against the appropriation within your budget, even though you didn't budget for it. It's what I'm hearing them say. Am I misinterpreting?
I don't think he has a choice.
I mean,
Well,
I don't know anything else he
I can't pay it
can
until
do.
it's appropriated. I can't pay it until I have an appropriation to pay against.
But what I'm hearing them say is use an appropriation that best describes what the expense is, even though you didn't plan on it.
Right.
I don't want to put words in your mouth, but is that what I'm understanding you to say?
yeah, the point is, it's a recurring expense line item that we need to address in this budget, but also going forward, so that we don't have to come back and look at taking money out of fund balance to begin with. That's my point. I know the bills due, I know we gotta pay it, it's, obviously, we gotta find an income stream to do it. All I'm saying is, let's see if we have some revenue items that have too much, we've overestimated in, transfer out of those line items into other charges and pay it that way.
You're just coming and giving them advance notice that that's likely to happen, and I understand where you're coming from.
I still have a little bit of confusion. Are we looking toward paying last year's charges from this fund or this year's?
We still have 3 students that we have not settled.
So
From
that
last year.
combination of five students, 6 students is a combination of last year and this year? Mm-hmm. Okay.
Okay. Thank you, Troy. Next item on the agenda is new business. You have any new business? Randy, anything? Okay, now I'll ask for any items not on the agenda. Anyone have any to speak? Yes, come on up, Mayor.
Good evening, I'm Karen Miller, resident of Blount County, and I'd like to bring to attention your credit card usage for August of this year. And I don't understand why the schools charge $37,004.14, the highway department $15,140, and the sheriff's department of $9,631.68, making a total of credit card expenditures for 1 month, $71,532.66. This is totally outrageous for charge cards, and I think that needs to be addressed. And if the schools are so short of money, like this funding they're needing, they better cut the credit cards up and use the money more wisely. Thank you.
Anyone else? Hear none.